Թարգման հովանավոր Dignity Health Glendale Memorial Hospital.
Being a doctor is one of the most honorable professions, and it's truly a privilege to be able to do this on a daily basis.
There's another aspect of medicine that we always forget about, and it's the mind and the interaction of the doctor with the patient.
When they're sick or when they're vulnerable, when they're in need, they need human kindness.
When we're treating a patient, we're treating the whole person, and that's hello, human kindness.
Բարի երեկո սիրելի բարեկամներ։ Այսօրվա մեր հյուրն է բարոն Jeff Pranq-ը, որ LA County-ին assessor-ն է, եւ պիտի իրեն հարցումներ հարցնենք ինչ է LA County assessor-ին կորձը եւ ինչ տեսակի տաքսեր իրենք կորոշեն եւ իրենց աշխատանքները հատկապես մեր նահանգի LA County-ին մեջ։ Welcome.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Thank you. I mean, I introduced you in Armenian, but let's introduce you properly in English. How long you been the assessor for the county?
I was just re-elected last December to my second term. I was first elected in 2014, so I'm in my 5th year as assessor.
Well, congratulations for the election, and we supported you. We want you to succeed in this important position.
I appreciate that.
The role of the assessor historically hasn't been that defined, or maybe not well defined in public's eye. Have you taken any steps to explain to our audience what are your duties, responsibilities? Sure. I mean, do you send the taxes to me or to our audience? That type of questions.
So it is one of those really important offices that people just don't really understand what it is. They know it has something to do with their property taxes, but I am not the guy who sends property tax bills. The property tax bill is sent by the tax collector, totally different department. My job is to establish the value of all taxable property in the county. We land, buildings, as well as business property. So the assessors, so a lot of people, when they think of the assessor, they think of their property tax bill and that number across the top for their ad valorem tax, and that we are related to that, but that's not precisely what we do. In many ways, I always tell people that in many ways my department is the most important local government agency that there is, because no other department can do their job until I've done mine. If I don't do my job thoroughly, accurately, and completely, that would mean that there are vital public resources that are not being collected to pay for things like teachers, police and fire, roads, libraries, and parks.
So you collect these taxes for the county, right?
So
for the county's budget or the state's?
For the county's budget, for school budgets, for city budgets, for special districts. So approximately 40% of every dollar in property taxes goes to public schools. In LA County, a little bit more than 20% goes to the County of Los Angeles government to pay for the sheriff and the courts, et cetera.
Public safety.
Public safety and public health, things of that nature, county parks. Depending on which city you live in, you may get from anywhere between 5 cents to 20 cents on the dollar in property taxes. Special districts, like water districts, get a piece of that money as well. So the way it works is when you purchase a home or you change ownership, my department tells you what it's worth at market value.
But isn't that pretty much set up by Prop 13? It says 1%?
Yes.
Has to be, or whatever market value is, 1%, right.
So my job is to determine what market value is. And this is important to remember. This confuses a lot of people when they buy their home. So let's say there's a house in a neighborhood where they're all worth about $500,000. But you get a good deal and you pay $350,000. But then you get your tax bill at 1% of market value, and it's based on $500,000, and you say, hey, I didn't pay $500,000.
Exactly. I mean, I didn't pay that. I paid only $350,000.
But it's not based on what you paid. It's based on market. So if you get a good deal, you save money on the purchase of the property, but not on the taxes.
But not on taxes.
The taxes are based on the market value, not the purchase price. Although usually market value and purchase price are the same thing.
Right. Does these taxes increase from year to year, or is pretty much set?
So
whatever that market value is at the year that you bought it.
When you buy your property, the price that you pay for it at market value, that is your base year permanently, as long as you own the home. Under Proposition 13, that's at 1%. So if you've spent $500,000, you'll pay $5,000 in year one for your property taxes. Prop 13 does have a cost of living adjustment, a CPI adjustment of 2% maximum. So every year, your property taxes could go up as much as 2%, never more than that.
Why is it in LA County is 1.25? Because when I look at my statement, it says 1.25, it doesn't say 1%.
So LA County voters a number of years ago voted another 0.25% property taxes to pay for additional services. So 1% of your property taxes is mandated by Proposition 13. A 0.25% is mandated by voter initiative in LA County.
What if I disagreed with your assessment?
So you can
what options, how do I challenge it?
So there's a number of ways you can challenge it. The first way is just administratively. Pick up the phone, call the appraiser who put the value on your property and say, I disagree. Give them your rationale and any evidence that you have. If they agree with you, they'll change it. If you don't agree, then you can file an appeal, an assessment appeal.
To who?
So it goes to the Assessment Appeals Board.
Okay.
And let me be clear, that's not under my jurisdiction.
So it's a separate entity,
separate.
You're appealing your decision.
Yes, my office is to the Assessment Appeals Board what the district attorney is to the Superior Court. The Assessment Appeals Board is appointed by the Board of Supervisors. So you would go before a panel of a 3-member panel of experts who will listen to your arguments. And the assessor, my staff, will argue why we think the value is what it is, and you will argue why you think it is wrong, and then the board will make a decision.
What if the board ruled with you, obviously you have no issue, ruled against you? Can you go higher up?
We can appeal it to the Superior Court. We usually don't, except in extenuating circumstances, but usually we will respect the decision of the board. Sometimes maybe in more complex commercial, industrial properties, we might have a difference depending on what the board comes up with, but you can appeal all the way up to the Superior Court.
What if you bought a property and for whatever reasons, or natural disaster or whatever, the value went down? Can you appeal and get your assessment lowered because your value is much less? Let's say you paid $10 million on a commercial property. Something happened in that neighborhood or some disaster, and all of a sudden it's worth only $5 million.
So
why should you pay based on $10 million?
So in 1978, the voters of California adopted Proposition 13 to stabilize property taxes. 2 years later, they adopted Proposition 8, which said if your property lost value, the assessor must reduce the assessed value accordingly. So if, let's say you purchased your property in 2007 for $500,000, then 2008, just 10 years ago, we had a recession.
Exactly.
And that property dropped down to $250,000. I am required by law to lower your value down to the market value if it's less than your base value. So
you have to adjust the base.
We have to adjust it. So
the
way it works is that, and this is happening actively today in LA County. So by 2010, 550,000 properties in LA County were worth less than what the owner paid for them. So we proactively went and lowered those values for those property owners. But here's what confuses people. So we lower the property value, but that's not a permanent reduction. Every year we look at your property value after that to see if it's recovering. So if
it's recovered, so you go in and you adjust it.
So we adjust it. We adjust it every year until your property gets back to that point that you purchased it at. So if it was $500,000 when you purchased it, the economy tanks and it goes down to $250,000. Then the economy recovers, and a year later it's now worth $350,000. We will adjust your property taxes upward to $350,000, but it will never go higher than your base year, the point at which you purchased it.
Let's say I bought a house 20 years ago, and I paid $500,000. Now it's worth $2 million, just hypothetically. Yes. But my base is still that $500,000 that I paid for it. You can never change it, even 20 years later.
That's correct. It's
based on Prop 13.
Your assessed value is based at the value of the property at the time of purchase, not at market value over time.
If I buy another house and I sell this house, can I take that base to the other house or no? It pretty much goes away.
No, in some cases you can. If you're a senior citizen, age 55 or older, you can transfer your lower base year value to your new home as long as the new home is at equal or lesser value to the house that you're selling.
Let's say I sold the house for $2 million. I go and buy a $2 million house somewhere else. Can I transfer my base of $500,000 to that $2 million house?
Yes, you can.
You can.
So
keep the same rate.
As long as it's the same or lesser value.
I see. So that protects you in some.
So and some other ways to protect your property value. Let's say you're getting ready for you're older. You know that your time is short, and you want to give your house to your children, but you're worried that this house you bought 20 years ago for $500,000, which today is worth $2 million, that your kids won't be able to afford the taxes on it. You can give your property to your children without it being reassessed. They can inherit your lower base year value.
The base.
And in some cases, you can give the property to your grandchildren.
Okay, so you can transfer it to your state, to them.
Yes.
Okay, exemption. It's always confusing. I'm confused myself, and I'm a CPA by training. And I don't understand it. What is the exemption? In a very simple term.
So there's a number of things that we call exclusions and exemptions. And these are programs that were voted on by the public at the ballot box to help homeowners, property owners, save money on their taxes. The most important one, which we're talking about a lot these days, is the homeowners exemption.
Right.
So in California, if you own your home and that is your primary residence, you automatically qualify for the homeowners exemption. And what the homeowners exemption does is it reduces your assessed value by $7,000 for property tax purposes, which will have the net impact of lowering your property taxes by $70 every year.
So you get a $70 break.
$70 break.
Break on your house because you live in it.
That's right. It's not, and I recognize $70 is not a huge amount of money.
But something for fixed income people.
And we estimate that in LA County, there's $30 million in unclaimed tax savings that homeowners are failing to secure.
So people don't claim these exemptions?
They're not claiming it because they don't know. So that's one of the reasons I'm glad to be on your show today, because I can talk about it.
So we can tell our audience,
yes,
please take the exemption.
If you don't have the homeowners exemption, file it.
There's a free money with the county sitting there.
You only have to file once. Each time you move or change ownership, you have to file. It's very simple. You can download the form on our website at assessor.lacounty.gov or call our office. And it takes a minute or two to fill out the form, and we'll process it. You'll begin saving $70 a year.
$70, okay.
If you're on a fixed income, you're a senior.
Something.
It's something, and after 10 years, it'll pay for a new water heater.
Right. We're going to take a short break.
Surely.
We're going to come back and we'll talk a little bit more about the state government, the county government, and your future plans and so forth. Սեր պայգամներ գաշ թաթարմը բիդարնենք եւ բիդի վերատարնանք մեր հայդակին թաթարեսպեր. Thank you. Սեր պայգամներ, այսօրվա մեր հյուրն է Jeff Pranq, LA County Assessor. Jeff, just before the break, I was thinking about the exemptions and lowering your tax base and so forth. What if you add things to your property? I mean, you build a whole new floor, or you put $500,000 extra in remodeling. Is that changes the base?
So that's a good question, and in many cases, yes, it will. If the general rule of thumb is that if you add square footage to your property, that additional square footage will be assessed. Now, it's important to note that it will not change the value of your entire property. If you purchased your property in 1980 and then you add a swimming pool, you will have two base years. You'll have the base year for the property that you purchased in 1980, and you'll have a new base year for that square footage that includes the swimming pool, or the garage that you convert into living space, or the second floor that you add to your one-story house. That will be reassessed based on a cost valuation.
What if you just remodeled it, put new tiles or new floors, painting, without adding square footage? That changes the value?
Generally not. If you remodel your kitchen, if you remodel your bathrooms, you put a new roof on, you replace your heating and air conditioning, those will not be reassessed.
Only square footage if you add it?
Generally only square footage. However, there are some exceptions. So if you decide to demo your interior and you add bathrooms and open up walls, those could create a reassessment. But the way that we learn about that is when you get a building permit from the city, The city sends us copies of those, and then we will look at it to determine whether we think that is a reassessable event.
It's not like I go in to your office and say, "Oh, I added this $500,000 extra."
No.
The licensing alerts you.
Yes, we are notified by the local jurisdiction that you had pulled a permit, and we analyze those permits.
I see. So
And
you look at it very
so
carefully.
if you pull out a permit for a remodeling and you get a call from the assessor, you should answer. Just tell them what's happening, because if you don't tell them and it's unclear, we will and we think it's accessible, we'll add additional value. And and if you didn't add square footage, then you'll have to argue with us and fix it.
I see. What if I added a solar unit?
Solar units are exempt from.
Okay, so there's no additional taxes because I added a solar.
That's correct. That was exempted under the law. We do keep records if you put in solar, but we do not assess those.
Assess those. Okay, so I'm safe by adding a solar system. Let me ask you about yourself. I mean, you got into this job, now you're on second term. What is your future, ambitions?
Well, the one thing I learned throughout I've been in public office for a long time. I was a mayor and city council member in West Hollywood for 18 years before I became assessor. But I think the best thing I can do for my future is do the job I have right now really well, and demonstrate that I'm a good administrator, that I'm a responsive public official. I think if I do this job well, if there's opportunities down the road, then people will.
So you're open to.
I'm not closed. I have to say though, I really like this job. I've been doing it for 4 years. I still have a couple of major projects that I'm working on that I'm very excited about. I'm not focused on my future. I'm focused on the present. But I like government. I like politics. And if down the road something presents itself that when I'm done doing what I'm doing right now, then I'll keep an open door.
What about something I was thinking is the business for businesses, the taxes on properties by businesses. Is that something different totally from homeowners?
So you're talking about what we call business personal property.
Right.
So business personal property essentially is machinery, office furniture, office equipment. That's all taxed the same as we do for real property at 1%. So every year, businesses will get something called the business property statement, and you have to tell us how many computers, how many chairs, desks, if you're a manufacturer, what type of machinery you have, and you pay property taxes on accumulated property valued at $5,000 or more. I did want to point out, though, that when I was first elected 4 years ago, businesses had to pay property taxes on their equipment if it was valued collectively at $2,000 or more. And I had an analysis done of that. So if you were a small business and you had $3,000 worth of equipment, you'd pay at 1% $30 a year.
$30, yeah.
So and it was ridiculous because we determined it cost me $50 to process that assessment. So we were losing
cost-benefit analysis, basically.
It made no sense. And we'd just been doing that for years. So I asked the Board of Supervisors to raise that threshold from $2,000 to $5,000, and we actually provided business tax relief to 50,000 small businesses throughout LA County. Removed them from the tax rolls altogether, saved them about $3.5 million, and importantly, it freed up a lot of work that my employees were doing that we were able to redirect their efforts to more valuable assessments.
How many employees you have in your jurisdiction?
So I have 1,400 employees. We're located in 6 different offices throughout the county. We're responsible. My budget is about $200 million, and I'm responsible for assessing the value of 2.5 million properties annually, valued at almost $1.6 trillion.
Wow.
And we generate $16 billion in property taxes, which goes to the county, to schools, to municipalities and special districts, which pays for all those services that we rely upon, such as roads and streets, libraries, parks, etc.
Do you tax boats, airplanes?
So yes, we do.
Private jets?
We assess private jets, private airplanes, and boats. We also assess commercial aircraft, like Delta and United at LAX and at Burbank. We also,
but if they're not based here, they're based, let's say, Delta in Atlanta, or
there is a formula under California law that we assess the amount of time that they spend in certain airports and in California airspace. So the moment they cross into California airspace,
they're taxed.
The taxation begins, and then we evaluate how much time they're on the ground in individual airports. It's a very complex thing. One of the things I did, I'm ashamed to say, I did not know until the last couple of months that we assess racehorses.
Racehorses?
Racehorses. I thought even my assistant assessor, who's been with the department for almost 30 years, didn't know that we assessed racehorses. But,
what else you assess? I mean, anything else that we didn't cover? I think we covered pretty much
so
everything. Is there something strange that you assess that the public is not aware?
So the racehorses was probably the most interesting one I've learned lately, but we also assess oil and gas refineries,
Okay.
Which are extremely complicated. And the way that we value that is different than anything else. It's not based on land value or equipment value. It's based on what is perceived to be in the ground and the extraction. It's extremely complex valuation methodology.
I read somewhere recently there was some effort to repeal Prop 13. Have you heard anything like that?
There's a proposal.
I think.
It's actually going to be on the ballot in November 2020. It's not a repeal of Prop 13. It's an amendment to Prop 13. It's
Right.
called the split roll or split assessment roll. And it proposes to reassess commercial and industrial properties at market value on an annual rate as opposed to the point of purchase. Like it's,
Not homeowners, just commercial.
The proposal exempts homeowners, including multifamily dwellings such as apartments, apartment buildings, but apply to all other commercial and industrial properties. And it would assess them either on an annual basis or on a cyclical basis, like every 1, 2, or 3 years. It'll have a significant impact on the way that we do business. The proponents estimate that there's as much as $9 billion in additional tax revenue that could be generated by taxing businesses differently. And their argument is that because businesses have, or commercial properties, have many other alternatives in terms of ownership. They can put together a limited liability corporation and change ownership without it being reassessed. Things that don't really, and so commercial properties do not change ownership with the same frequency as residential properties. So their argument is that since Prop 13 was put into effect almost 4 years ago, the burden of paying property taxes has shifted from commercial industrial properties to residential properties. And they believe that this will correct that issue and generate additional revenues for public services.
You mentioned there's $16 billion that your office assesses and it's collected ultimately.
$16 billion is the gross amount of property taxes that is collected. Approximately $6 billion of that goes to LA County government. 40% of that $16 billion goes to public schools. Roughly 15 to 20% on average goes to individual cities, and the remainder to these special districts.
Special districts. Is that enough to cover these budgets?
No, it's not. It is so LA County budget is $30 billion. Property taxes are about $6 billion of that. It's the second largest source of revenue that the county has.
Oh, yes. Okay. What about people when they transfer their assets through when they pass to other individuals? Or I know we talked about it briefly. But is there any way to keep those bases and not change them? Because that's a bigger concern for somebody like me if I'm going to transfer things to my kids, let's say.
So this is really important. One, sometimes people get in trouble.
By making a mistake, I'm afraid it will mess up the base because I bought it so many years ago.
So there's a number of things that get people into trouble, and I'm glad to have the chance to talk about it. One is make sure that your children know that when you die, that they let us know that you died.
They should inform you that he passed away.
Yes, they need to do that because you have, under the law, what's called Proposition 58, the parent-to-child exclusion. You can give your property and your low tax base to your children, but they're required to tell us that you have passed away, and they're required to fill out an application for Proposition 58.
The person died.
So a lot of people know that you can inherit your parents' property value, but then a couple years go by and they get this huge tax bill. They say, why did I get a tax bill? This was my parents. Well, you didn't tell us that your parent died. We found out about it through other methods, and you didn't fill out the form. So we can usually fix it and make it apply that.
What if you transferred your property to a living trust? Is that changes the assessment?
So generally speaking, you can put your property into a trust without it being reassessed. But there's a precision procedure. If you don't do it accurately, our system could read it as transfer and reassess it. So it's best to get expert advice when you're doing your transfer.
Through an attorney who will do it properly.
I will caution you that we have learned that even some real estate attorneys are not always giving proper advice. You might want to call the assessor's office
and ask them how it's properly done.
The main thing is that the ownership, the current ownership needs to mirror the ownership in the trust.
Exactly.
So if it's you and your wife,
let's say it's me, Mike Sarian's living trust, or family trust. So that can be transferred to that trust without triggering any taxes.
So if you make any changes, like if your wife's name is on one document, not on the other, that will trigger reassessment.
That triggers the assessment. Okay. How about education? How do you educate the public? Because very little is known. Here I'm a pretty sophisticated guy. I know very little about your department and your work. I mean, how do you educate the public? How do you make them aware of all these rules and specific things?
It is
the outreach. How do you outreach to our community?
Well, it is really difficult. And I will say that I don't want to be uncharitable toward my predecessors, but I think a lot of assessors are focused on doing the job in the office and making sure that we're being fair and accurate. But we're a public service agency, and I put a lot of emphasis on trying to educate the public. It's very difficult because major media like the LA Times and television stations don't...
I read LA Times every day for the last 30 years. I've never seen any articles.
They don't really cover us. I've been pleased that some of the major networks have been talking about homeowners exemption this week at our request. But it requires that I put a lot of shoe leather time into going on local television stations like this, I speak at a lot of chambers of commerce and associations of realtors and Rotary groups. We have a very aggressive social media program. We send out hundreds of thousands of emails to taxpayers
educating
in LA County.
The public,
So it's when you don't have access to major media, you got to work a lot harder. And sometimes it's frustrating because we work so hard and then still.
But these are all local issues. I mean, it's mainly
exactly.
It's in LA County. Make the public aware in the LA County.
I've got a really good public affairs team, and we're trying to come up with creative, innovative ways to reach people. We're working through municipalities, asking them to include our information on their website. We're trying to get realtors where they send out their mass emails and mailers about homes that they sold in the neighborhood, put some information about things like the homeowners exemption. So we're trying to be as creative as we can to get information out to those people who need to know.
Well, we're at the end of our show. I really appreciate your explanations, your coming to our show, telling our public, what the role is and the benefits of at least knowing these issues. I think, as you said, the public is not aware of some of these issues, and I think shows like us, at least in our community, will make them aware. And I really appreciate your willingness to come to our show and explaining.
It's my pleasure. Two pieces of advice for those watching. One is go to our website, assessor.lacounty.gov, and look to the left-hand side of the screen. There's a button that says "Lower My Taxes."
Oh, yeah, I'm going to call that one.
Go to that one
taxes.
to see if you qualify for those programs, and also sign up for our newsletter so you can get information about that will help you understand.
Yeah, I'm going to visit your office because I have another issue that we'll talk off the show.
We'll help you out.
Սիրելի պայգամներ, այսպեսով կպագենք մեր շոուն, այսօրվա մեր հյուրը բարոն Jeff Pranq-ը փաստադրեց LA County assessor-ին կորձերը եւ իրեն շնորհակալություն կուզենք հայտնել եւ բարիքի շեր։
Հաղորդման հովանավոր Dignity Health Glendale Memorial Hospital